On the stormy night of April 2nd, 1849, in Valdosta, Lowndes County, Georgia, a man did something that would echo through the entire South for decades. Isaiah Johnson, known as Ironback among the 180 enslaved people of Whitmore Plantation, snapped his iron shackles with his bare hands and killed 7 white men in a single night. His master, his overseer, a slave trader, 2 patrollers, the master's wife, and a driver who had betrayed his own people. By dawn, 7 bodies lay scattered across the plantation. By sunrise, Isaiah had vanished into the Okefenokee swamp, never to be captured. The largest manhunt in Georgia history, 300 men strong, with bloodhounds and Pinkerton detectives, searched for 6 weeks. They found nothing but rumors and fear. This is the true story of the man they called Ironback, the man who broke chains, the man who could not be held. But to understand that night of blood and thunder, we must go back. Back to when Isaiah was still in chains. Back to when he still believed patience and endurance would save his family. Back to the beginning. Spring arrived early in southern Georgia in 1849. The cotton fields of Lowndes County stretched for miles, white bowls ready for picking, acres upon acres of wealth built on broken backs and stolen lives. The Whitmore plantation sat like a kingdom unto itself, 2,000 acres of prime cotton land, the big house rising white and imposing on a small hill, surrounded by magnolias and live oaks draped with Spanish moss. In those fields, from dawn until you couldn't see your own hands in the darkness, 180 enslaved men, women, and children worked under the Georgia sun. Field hands, house servants, blacksmiths, cooks, stable boys, seamstresses. An entire world of human beings reduced to property. Their lives measured in pounds of cotton picked, in scars accumulated, in children born to be sold. Among them moved a man who seemed carved from different material than other men, Isaiah. Johnson stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, massive even by modern standards, extraordinary for his time. 280 pounds of muscle built from 26 years of field work that would have killed lesser men. His hands could palm a man's skull like a child's ball. His shoulders were so broad he had to turn sideways through standard door frames. When he walked, the earth seemed to register each footfall. But it was his back that gave him his name. From neck to waist, Isaiah's back was a map of 26 years of torture. Hundreds of whip scars, layered upon each other so many times that the skin had formed thick keloid ridges, tough as leather, knotted like tree bark. Some scars were thin lines, others were thick ropes of scar tissue. The newest cuts would split open the old wounds. The old wounds would heal over the new. Year after year, layer upon layer, until his back looked like iron itself. Ironback, the other enslaved people called him. Said with respect, said with awe, said with pity. Isaiah had been born in Angola, in a village whose name he still whispered in dreams. Captured at 12 during a raid, marched in chains to the coast, packed into the darkness of a slave ship for the Middle Passage. Of the 300 people chained in that floating coffin, only 147 survived to see Charleston Harbor. Isaiah was one of them. Sold at auction in Charleston to a cotton broker. Resold 2 years later to a tobacco farmer in Virginia. Sold again when that farmer died to a rice plantation in South Carolina. Finally, at 16, purchased by Cornelius Whitmore II and brought to Georgia to work cotton. That was 1827, 22 years ago now. Isaiah had been at Whitmore Plantation ever since. He knew every acre of those 2,000. Knew which areas flooded when the Withlacoochee River rose. Knew where the cottonmouths nested and where the wild muscadines grew. Knew the sound of the bell that woke them before dawn and the sound of the horn that released them after dark. Knew the feel of cotton bolls ripping his fingers bloody. Knew the weight of 400-pound bales on his back. He was the strongest man on the plantation, perhaps the strongest man in the county. He could lift loads that took 3 normal men, could plow more rows in a day than any 2 field hands, could swing an axe from sun up to sundown without pause. Master Whitmore had been offered $1,500 for Isaiah twice, refused both times. Too valuable, too strong, too profitable. But Isaiah's strength was more than physical. He remembered Africa, remembered his mother's face, his father's voice, the songs of his village. While other enslaved people, especially those born in America, forgot the old ways, Isaiah kept them alive. He could speak Kimbundu, though there was no one left who understood. He remembered the stories his grandmother had told, the way his people honored their ancestors, the proper way to pray. And in the slave quarters at night, when the white folks slept, Isaiah taught these things to his son. Ezekiel was 6 years old, small for his age, but quick and bright, eyes that missed nothing, memory like a trap. Isaiah would tell him stories of Angola, of warriors and kings, of a time when their people walked free under African sky, would teach him words in Kimbundu, would show him how to move through the world with dignity, even in chains. Ruth, Ezekiel's mother, would watch them together and smile. She was 32, born on a Virginia plantation, sold south when she was 14. She and Isaiah had been married in the slave quarter way, jumping the broom together 7 years ago. No legal recognition, no protection under law. Master Whitmore could separate them whenever he wanted, could sell Ezekiel tomorrow if the mood struck him. But for 7 years they had been together, a family, the only thing that made the hell bearable. Isaiah would carry Ezekiel on those massive shoulders as they walked back from the fields at dusk. The boy would laugh, up high where he could see over everything, riding the giant that was his father. Ruth would walk beside them, her hand touching Isaiah's arm. These moments, these small moments of something like happiness, stolen from the jaws of hell itself. On Sundays, their 1 half-day off, Isaiah would take Ezekiel to the creek, would teach him to swim, would tell him about the ocean, about crossing it in chains, would make sure the boy knew where he came from, who his people were, what they had been before the chains. "You strong like your papa," Isaiah would say in his deep voice, accent still thick with Africa after all these years. "You got warrior blood, king's blood. You remember that." Ezekiel would nod solemnly, trying to puff out his small chest. "I'm strong." "You are. But being strong," Isaiah would tap the boy's head, then his heart, "is also here and here. Strong mind, strong spirit, those they cannot chain." The other enslaved people respected Isaiah, not just for his strength, but for his dignity. He never informed on others, never took the role of driver, though Master Whitmore had offered it twice, knowing Isaiah could control the other enslaved people. Isaiah refused, would take his whippings rather than deliver them to others. When someone was sick, Isaiah would share his food. When someone's child was sold, Isaiah would sit with them in their grief. When someone tried to run and was caught, brought back bloody and broken, Isaiah would help carry them to their cabin and tend their wounds. But Isaiah himself never tried to run. Some thought it was because of Ezekiel. Can't run with a child. Some thought it was because Isaiah knew his size made him too visible. Can't hide when you're 6'4" and built like a barn. Some whispered that maybe Isaiah had given up. 26 years of slavery. Maybe the spirit breaks eventually, even in the strongest. They were all wrong. Isaiah hadn't run because he was waiting, watching, learning. He observed everything, every detail of the plantation's rhythms, every habit of Master Whitmore, the overseer, the patrollers. He noticed which slaves could be trusted and which would inform for an extra ration. He saw where the weapons were kept, where the horses were stabled, which roads led north. He was a man who knew that strength without strategy was just another way to die. So he watched, waited, endured, built his strength, taught his son, loved his woman, and planned. Not for escape, not yet, but for survival. Always for survival. One day, he would whisper to Ruth at night, her head on his chest in their tiny cabin, "One day we walk free." "How?" she would whisper back. "How, Isaiah?" "Don't know yet, but it come. I feel it. Something comin'." Ruth would hold him tighter, would pray he was right, would pray they lived to see that day. But Isaiah's strength and patience and dignity meant nothing to the men who owned him. To Master Cornelius Whitmore III, Isaiah was livestock. Valuable livestock, yes, but livestock nonetheless. An investment, a tool, property to be used until it broke. Cornelius Whitmore III was 52 years old, inheritor of the plantation his grandfather had carved from Creek Indian land in 1805. Tall, lean, with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. Always dressed impeccably, even in the Georgia heat. Three-piece suits, gold watch chain, polished boots. The very picture of Southern aristocracy. He had inherited 140 slaves when his father died in 1840. Through breeding and purchase, had increased that number to 180. The plantation produced 300 bales of cotton per year, worth roughly $30,000 at current prices. Cornelius Whitmore was, by any measure, a wealthy man. He was also a gambling addict. Poker, mostly. High-stakes games with other planters in Valdosta, in Macon, in Savannah. Sometimes he won. More often he lost. In the past 2 years, he had lost badly. Owed money to planters in 3 counties. Owed money to banks in Charleston. The cotton prices had dropped. The soil was depleting. He needed cash. So he began selling off his surplus stock. Whitmore considered himself a reasonable master. He didn't work his slaves to death like some planters. Provided minimal medical care, let them have Sundays off. Even allowed them to keep small garden plots. In his mind, he was benevolent. He also whipped them regularly. Sold children from their mothers when cash flow demanded. Raped the women who caught his eye. Refused to recognize marriages between slaves. Deliberately separated families to prevent unity. Used starvation as punishment. Made examples of runaways by having them tortured publicly. But in his mind, he was reasonable. His wife, Constance Whitmore, 48 years old, was, if anything, worse. A Georgia plantation daughter raised to command enslaved servants, she was casually cruel in the way only the perpetually comfortable can be. Would have a house slave whipped for spilling tea. Would burn them with hat pins for impudence. Would sell a woman's children as punishment for perceived slights. She hated Isaiah particularly. His size frightened her. His African features, his unbroken bearing, his eyes that looked through rather than down. She repeatedly asked her husband to sell him. Whitmore refused. Too profitable. Then there was Jacob the Butcher Thornton, the overseer, 38 years old, poor white from the Carolina backcountry, hired 8 years ago to extract maximum labor from the enslaved workforce. He was good at his job, very good. The plantation's cotton output had increased by 40% under his supervision. His methods were simple: terror and pain. Thornton kept detailed records. Each slave had a quota. Miss your quota? You got 10 lashes. Miss it twice in a week? 20 lashes. Miss it 3 times, you spent a night in the sweatbox, a metal cage left in the sun. 4th time, you were sold to the Mississippi Delta cotton plantations, where life expectancy was measured in years. Nobody missed quota 4 times. Thornton was creative with his punishments. He had introduced the standing torture, where slaves were forced to stand on tiptoes, hands chained above their heads for 12 hours. He had brought thumb screws from somewhere. He would rub salt and turpentine into fresh whip wounds. He would force enslaved people to whip each other, breaking their spirits by making them inflict pain on their own. He was especially cruel to the women, would rape them casually, would whip pregnant women while they lay in holes dug to protect the belly, preserving the valuable unborn property while destroying the mother, would fondle girls as young as 13. The enslaved people called him the butcher, not because he killed often, but because of how he hurt them, like butchering meat, mechanical, efficient, without a trace of human feeling. Thornton had whipped Isaiah 73 times over 8 years, more than any other slave. Isaiah's strength meant he got the hardest tasks, and the hardest tasks meant sometimes he failed to meet quota. Each failure brought the whip. Isaiah took his whippings without sound, would walk to the whipping post when called, would strip his shirt without being told, would grip the post and close his eyes, would remain standing throughout no matter how many lashes, would walk back to the fields afterward, blood running down his back, and continue working. This enraged Thornton. He wanted screams, wanted begging, wanted to see these creatures break. Isaiah never broke. One day, Thornton would say, "I'm gonna make you scream, boy. I swear to God I'll find what breaks you." He should have left that alone. The other figure in this tragedy was Silas, the driver. Drivers were enslaved people elevated to supervisory positions. They organized work gangs, reported infractions, sometimes delivered whippings themselves. Masters used them to create division among the enslaved, to prevent solidarity. Drivers got better food, better clothes, their own cabins, got to feel a small measure of power in a world where they had none. Most drivers walked a careful line. They would appear strict to the white men, lenient to their people, would warn others before reporting them, would deliver light whippings when forced to whip at all. Silas was not most drivers. 41 years old, born on the plantation, Silas had been driver for 6 years. He had embraced his role completely, would report infractions eagerly, would whip with enthusiasm, would inform on escape plans, on stolen food, on secret meetings. He had sent 17 people to the whipping post in 6 years, had directly caused the sale of 4 troublemakers to the Deep South. The other enslaved people despised him, avoided him, would not speak freely in his presence, saw him as a traitor, as something worse than the white men. The white men were enemies. Silas was betrayer. He and Isaiah had clashed twice. First time was when Silas reported a young boy for eating a stolen yam. Isaiah intervened, said he had given the boy the yam from his own rations, took the whipping instead. 10 lashes. Second time was when Silas tried to deliver a whipping to an old woman who couldn't make quota. Isaiah stepped between them, said nothing, just stood there, 6 foot 4 inches of silent refusal. Silas backed down, reported Isaiah instead, 20 lashes. After that, they avoided each other, Isaiah with contempt, Silas with fear. But Silas had power in one area. Information. He heard everything, every whisper, every plan, every secret. He knew who was planning to run, who was stealing food, who met secretly in the woods at night. He knew everything because someone was always willing to inform to a driver to gain favor. And Silas reported everything to Thornton, who reported to Master Whitmore. It was a perfect system of oppression. The enslaved. People were isolated from each other by fear and divided by the driver system. They vastly outnumbered their masters, but surveillance and betrayal kept them from ever organizing effectively. A few whites controlled nearly 200 black people through careful brutality and systematic division. It had worked for generations. It wouldn't work much longer. If you're feeling the weight of this history, the sheer calculated evil of the system, you should. This was America. This was real. 180 human beings held in bondage on a single plantation. Thousands of plantations across the South. Millions of people born into chains, dying in chains, never knowing freedom. And if you're wondering how Isaiah endured it for 26 years, how he kept his sanity, kept his humanity, the answer was simple. Ruth and Ezekiel, his family, the only good thing in hell. Every scar on his back was worth it to see Ezekiel laugh. Every humiliation was bearable if Ruth was waiting in their cabin at night. Every murderous impulse was controlled because he had something to protect, someone to protect. That protection was an illusion, of course. He had no legal right to his family. No law protected them. No power could keep them together if Master Whitmore decided otherwise. But the illusion kept him alive, kept him human, kept the rage banked low instead of exploding. Until March 15, 1849, when the illusion shattered completely, and Isaiah learned what he should have known all along. In slavery, you cannot protect anything. You can only watch it be destroyed. March 15, 1849 dawned cool and misty. Spring was transitioning to summer. The cotton plants were young, not yet ready for harvest. This was cultivating season, the time between planting and picking when the workload was slightly lighter. Not easy, never easy, but slightly less brutal than harvest. Isaiah woke before the horn, as always. In the darkness of the cabin, he could hear Ruth's breathing beside him. Ezekiel curled between them. The boy had grown so much. His feet almost reached Isaiah's knees now. Isaiah lay there in the darkness, savoring these final moments before the day began. Moments of peace, of family, of something like contentment. The horn sounded. Time to work. They rose, dressed in the darkness. Isaiah's clothes were patched and repatched, too small for his massive frame. Sleeves ending halfway up his forearms, pants barely reaching his ankles. Ruth wore a simple shift, worn thin from years of washing. Ezekiel had one shirt, one pair of pants, no shoes. They walked to the fields together, joined by the other enslaved people emerging from their cabins. 180 people moving in the pre-dawn darkness toward another day of labor. The children went to lighter tasks, pulling weeds, carrying water. The field hands to the cotton rows. The house servants to the big house. Isaiah was assigned to the plow team that day. 3 men and a mule, breaking new ground for expansion. Back-breaking work. The kind of work that destroyed men's bodies by 40. Isaiah was 38. His back was destroyed. His hands were gnarred with broken bones never set properly. His knees ached constantly. His shoulders carried permanent bruises from the weight of cotton bales. But he was still strong, still able to work, still valuable. He worked through the morning, sweat soaking his clothes despite the cool air. The sun rose, burned off the mist. The temperature climbed. The work continued. At noon they had 30 minutes to eat. Cornmeal mush, no meat, no vegetables. Isaiah ate mechanically, fuel for the body. Looked around at his people. Saw exhaustion in every face. Saw scars on every back. Saw despair in most eyes. But not all. Some eyes still held fire, still held hope, still held the possibility of resistance. Isaiah found those eyes, nodded to them. A silent acknowledgement. We endure. We survive. We remember. who we are. After the meal, back to work. The afternoon stretched endlessly. The sun beat down. The rows seemed infinite. The work was never finished. There was always more ground to break, more plants to tend, more cotton to pick when harvest came. Isaiah's mind wandered as his body worked. Thought about Ezekiel. The boy was learning to read, secretly. One of the house slaves, an old man named Thomas, who had been taught by a liberal master decades ago, was teaching a few children in exchange for food. Isaiah gave Thomas part of his rations every week to teach Ezekiel. Illegal, of course. Georgia law forbade teaching slaves to read, punishable by whipping for the student, sale or death for the teacher. But Isaiah wanted his son to have knowledge. Knowledge was a weapon they couldn't easily take away. He thought about Ruth, wondered what she was doing. She worked in the laundry, scrubbing white people's clothes in scalding water until her hands were raw. Hard work, but out of the sun, which was something, and away from Thornton's immediate supervision, which was everything. He thought about freedom, what it would mean. To walk where you wanted, to keep what you earned, to protect your family, to say no and have it mean something, to be human in the eyes of the law. The horn sounded. End of work for the day. The sun was setting. 14 hours of labor completed. Tomorrow they would do it again. Isaiah walked back to the slave quarters, every muscle aching. He was getting older. The work was getting harder. How many more years could he maintain this pace? 5? 10? What happened when he could no longer lift 400-pound bales? When he was no longer the strongest? Would he be sold to the Deep South? Worked to death in the Mississippi Delta cotton fields where life expectancy was 3 years? Or would he simply be killed? Some planters did that. Once a slave was too old to work, no longer profitable, a bullet was cheaper than feeding them. He reached the slave quarters, small wooden cabins packed together, barely weatherproof, no windows, dirt floors. Each cabin housing 5 to 10 people. Isaiah's cabin was larger, a concession to his size. He had to duck to enter. Ruth was already there, starting a fire to cook their ration of cornmeal. Ezekiel was sitting in the corner, scratching letters in the dirt with a stick, learning. Isaiah felt something loosen in his chest. They were here. They were safe. Another day survived. He sat heavily on the floor. Ruth brought him water in a cracked cup. He drank it down, tasted the iron from the well. "Long day?" Ruth asked. "All days long," Isaiah replied. His voice was deep, gravelly, the accent from Angola still thick after 26 years. "But we here, we alive." Ruth smiled. "We are." Ezekiel looked up from his letters. "Papa, I learned a new word today." "Oh, what word?" "Freedom." The word hung in the air. Isaiah looked at his son, 6 years old, and already learning the word that would define his existence. "That a big word," Isaiah said slowly. "You know what it mean?" "Thomas says it mean when nobody owns you, when you belong to yourself." "That right. That what it mean." "Are we free, Papa?" The question was innocent, childish, but it cut deeper than any whip. Isaiah was silent for a long moment. Ruth had stopped cooking, was watching him, waiting to see how he would answer. Finally, Isaiah spoke. "No, son, we not free, not yet. We slaves. That mean we belong to Master Whitmore. We his property, like his horses, his tools." Ezekiel's face fell. "But Thomas says in the Bible all men are equal." "Bible say many things. White men believe some parts, forget other parts. Forget the part that say all men equal when it come to us. Why? Because money. Because they want to be rich, and we make them rich with our work. Cotton king down here, cotton built on our backs. They not let that go easy. Ezekiel absorbed this. Then, will I be slave forever? Isaiah reached out, cupped his son's small face in one massive hand. Hope not. I pray not. Maybe, he paused. Maybe things change. Maybe one day you walk free. Maybe you have children who never know chains. You think so? Isaiah wanted to say yes, wanted to give his son hope. But he was also a man who dealt in truth. I don't know, but I hope. Hope all I got sometimes. Ruth served dinner. Cornmeal mush, boiled greens from their garden plot. They ate together in silence, the small family huddled by the fire in their tiny cabin. Outside, night had fallen completely. Other fires flickered in other cabins. Low voices murmured. Someone was singing a spiritual, soft and mournful. After dinner, Isaiah lay on the pallet they used for a bed. Ruth curled against him. Ezekiel lay on his other side, already asleep, the exhaustion of childhood labor pulling him down. Isaiah stared at the dark ceiling, thought about freedom, about hope, about how much longer he could endure this, about what would happen to Ruth and Ezekiel when he finally broke or died. Isaiah, Ruth whispered, you awake? Yeah. I'm scared. Of what? Master been looking at the books, been calculating. Prices down, debts up. He gonna sell some of us. Isaiah's body tensed. How you know? How slaves hear things. Mistress was talking. Master owes money, lots of money. Need to sell slaves to pay it. Who he gonna sell? Don't know, but her voice broke. Isaiah, what if he sells Ezekiel? He's prime age, young, healthy, smart, could fetch good price. The fear that Isaiah kept buried deep surged upward. He won't. Boy too young, not worth much yet. Some buyers want young ones, train 'em up. Ezekiel already strong for his age, smart. He would... Stop! Isaiah's voice was harsh. Don't talk like that. Don't put that in the world. They lay in silence. Outside, the spiritual had ended. The night was quiet, except for the sound of crickets and distant frogs. If he tries, Isaiah whispered, so softly Ruth barely heard it. If Master tries to sell my son, I will... Kill him! Ruth grabbed his arm. Don't say that. Don't even think it. They hang you. Let them. Rather hang than watch my son sold south. And leave me alone? Leave Ezekiel without father? Isaiah had no answer to that. They lay awake for a long time. Eventually, Ruth's breathing evened out. She slept. Isaiah couldn't. He stared at the darkness and felt something shift inside him. Some final restraint beginning to crack. He didn't know it yet, but Ruth's fear was prescient. In 3 days, everything would change. In 3 days, Isaiah's worst nightmare would come true, and the man they called Ironback would break free. March 18th, 1849. The day started normally. Horn at dawn, same routine, work in the fields. But around mid-morning, word spread through the enslaved people like wildfire. A slave trader had arrived, Marcus Doyle, known throughout Georgia and Alabama, specialized in bulk purchases, would buy 20, 30 slaves at once and march them in coffles to the Deep South markets, Mobile, New Orleans, Natchez, where cotton plantations consumed human lives like furnaces consumed coal. Doyle was 45 years old, heavyset, with mutton chop sideburns and cold gray eyes. He wore a broad hat, carried a whip and a pistol, and traveled with 2 assistants who were essentially hired thugs. They arrived in a wagon equipped with chains and shackles, ready for transport. When the field slaves saw the wagon, panic rippled through them. Mothers grabbed their children. Young men looked for places to hide. Everyone knew what Doyle's arrival meant. Someone was being sold. But who? Isaiah was in a far field when the wagon arrived, didn't see it at first, was focused on his work, trying not to think about Ruth's fears from 3 nights ago, trying to believe it would be fine. Master Whitmore wouldn't sell Ezekiel. Too young, not profitable yet. Keep believing that. Around noon, Silas the driver came running to the plow team. "Isaiah, Master wants you at the big house." Now, Isaiah's blood went cold. Why? Didn't say, just said, "Bring ya." Isaiah looked at the other men on his team, saw fear in their eyes. This wasn't normal. Masters didn't call specific slaves to the house during work hours unless something was happening. He followed Silas across the plantation. His mind raced. What could this be? Had he done something wrong? Failed some quota? Was he being sold? At 38, he was entering the decline years for field slaves. Maybe Whitmore had decided he was past peak value. Sell him now before his worth dropped further. But then why call him to the house? Sales usually happened in the yard. They rounded the big house. In front, Isaiah saw the slave trader's wagon, saw Doyle talking with Master Whitmore, saw Thornton the overseer standing nearby. And then Isaiah saw something that made his heart stop. Ruth and Ezekiel, standing between 2 of Doyle's assistants. Ruth was crying. Ezekiel looked terrified. Isaiah broke into a run. "Ruth! Ezekiel!" Thornton stepped in front of him. "Stop right there, boy." Isaiah tried to push past. Thornton drew his pistol, aimed it at Isaiah's face. I said, "Stop." Isaiah stopped, but every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to explode. "What is this? Why they here?" Master Whitmore stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, almost guilty. Almost. "Isaiah, I have debts. The plantation is in financial difficulty. I need to liquidate some assets." Liquidate. Assets. The words white men used when they meant selling human beings. "You selling them?" Isaiah's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm selling the boy, Ezekiel. Mr. Doyle here is offering a good price." The world tilted. Isaiah felt like he was falling, even though he was standing still. "No, no, Master, please. He's just a baby. He only 6. Please don't." "He's a strong boy, smart. He'll fetch $400. That's good money for a child." "I'll work double, triple, "You already work harder than any 3 men." There's no more to give. Whitmore actually sounded regretful, as if this were some unfortunate natural disaster rather than a choice he was making. "It's done. He leaves today." Isaiah turned to Doyle. "Please, please don't take my son. I'll pay you. I'll work for you. Doyle laughed, cold, dismissive. "You'll pay me? With what, boy? You don't own nothing. You are nothing. Now step back before I have my men chain you." Isaiah looked at Ruth. She was sobbing, holding Ezekiel so tight the boy could barely breathe. "Bring the boy," Doyle said to his assistants. They moved toward Ruth. She screamed, "No, no, you can't. He's my baby." One of the assistants grabbed Ezekiel. Ruth wouldn't let go. The assistant yanked hard. Ruth was pulled forward, hit the ground, but she kept holding on. "Please, please don't take him." Isaiah roared, an inhuman sound, lunged forward. Thornton fired his pistol into the air. "I will shoot you dead, Isaiah. I swear to God." Isaiah stopped again, but his hands were opening and closing. His breathing was ragged. He was 3 seconds from attacking. Master Whitmore saw it. Chain him now before he does something stupid." 2 more white men emerged from the house, overseers from neighboring plantations, there for business. They grabbed Isaiah's arms. Even with 4 men, they could barely hold him. Ruth was still on the ground, still holding Ezekiel. The boy was crying now. "Mama, Papa, help me!" Doyle nodded to his assistant. The man drew back his hand and slapped Ruth across the face. Once, twice. She didn't let go. He punched her in the ribs. She gasped, her grip loosened. He ripped Ezekiel from her arms. "No!" Ruth scrambled after them. The assistant kicked her. She fell. Isaiah went berserk. It took all 4 men plus Thornton to hold him. He was screaming in Kimbundu, ancient curses, calling down his ancestors' wrath. Thrashing so hard the men holding him were lifted off their feet. "Get chains!" Thornton yelled. "Heavy chains!" They brought chains, wrapped them around Isaiah's wrists, his ankles, thick iron chains meant for the most dangerous slaves. Still he fought. They added more chains, wrapped them around his chest, his waist. Finally, he couldn't move, could barely breathe, could only watch. Doyle's assistant carried Ezekiel to the wagon. The boy was screaming, "Papa! Papa! Don't let them take me!" They threw him into the back of the wagon with other captured children. 3 boys, 2 girls, all under 10 years old. All crying, all terrified. They chained them together in a coffle, iron collars around their necks. Ruth crawled forward. "Please, please, he all I got. Please don't take my baby." Nobody listened. Isaiah was forced to his knees by the weight of the chains. His voice was hoarse from screaming. "Master, Whitmore, Master, please, I'm begging you. Take me instead. Sell me. Keep the boy, please." It was the first time in his adult life that Isaiah had begged. The first time he had gotten on his knees voluntarily. The first time he had asked white men for mercy. Whitmore couldn't even look at him. "It's business, Isaiah, just business. The boy brings more years of future labor. You're already past your prime. It makes economic sense." Economic sense? Isaiah's son, sold for economic sense. Doyle climbed onto the wagon. "We leavin'. Anybody tries to follow, we shoot them." "Wait!" Ruth gasped. She stood, swaying, ran to the wagon, reached through the bars to touch Ezekiel's hand one last time. "Baby, baby, listen to Mama. You be strong. You remember who you are. You remember your papa's stories. You remember Africa. You remember you come from kings. You hear me?" Ezekiel nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Mama, I scared." "I know, baby, I know. But you brave. You strong like your papa. You survive. You survive, and maybe—" Her voice broke completely. Doyle cracked his whip. The horses lurched forward. Ruth's hand was torn from Ezekiel's. She ran. Alongside the wagon, screaming her son's name. The wagon picked up speed. She couldn't keep up. She fell to her knees in the dirt, watching the wagon carry her son away. Isaiah watched his son disappear down the road. Watched those small hands gripping the bars of the wagon. Watched that small face looking back, crying for his papa. Watched until the wagon was a speck in the distance. Then, gone. Everything inside Isaiah went silent. Not calm, silent. The silence of something fundamental breaking. The silence before an explosion. The silence of a man who had just lost the only thing keeping him human. The men holding the chains loosened their grip. Isaiah didn't move, just knelt there in the dirt, wrapped in iron, staring at the empty road. Ruth crawled toward him. Her face was already swelling from where she'd been hit. Blood trickled from her mouth. She reached Isaiah, collapsed against him. "They took him! They took our baby!" Isaiah couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only kneel there as something died inside him and something else was born. Master Whitmore cleared his throat. "Isaiah, I know this is difficult, but you'll adjust. We'll find you another woman. You can have more children." Isaiah turned his head, looked at Whitmore. The master actually stepped back. Whatever was in Isaiah's eyes in that moment made even the man who owned him afraid. "Get him back to the quarters," Whitmore said quickly. "Keep him chained for a few days until he settles down." Thornton and the other men dragged Isaiah to his feet, marched him back to the slave quarters, chains rattling with every step. The other enslaved people watched in silence. They knew what had happened. They had all lost children, parents, spouses. They knew this particular agony. They threw Isaiah into his cabin, left him chained, left Ruth with him. The door closed. They were alone in the darkness. Ruth curled into a ball and sobbed, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The sound of a mother whose child has been ripped away. Isaiah sat against the wall. The chains were so heavy he couldn't stand, could barely move. He stared at the spot where Ezekiel's pallet had been, at the stick the boy used to practice his letters, at the small pile of rocks Ezekiel collected, each one precious to him. Gone, all gone. His son was being taken south, to Mississippi, to Louisiana, to some plantation where they worked enslaved people to death in 3 years, where there were no Sundays off, where the overseers were even more brutal, where Ezekiel would forget his letters, forget the stories, forget his father's face. If he survived the journey. Children died on coffles. Disease, exposure, despair. Maybe Ezekiel wouldn't even make it to his destination. Maybe Isaiah's last sight of his son would be the last sight ever. That night was the longest of Isaiah's life. Ruth cried until she had no more tears. Then she just lay there, empty, destroyed. Isaiah didn't cry, didn't speak, didn't move. Just sat wrapped in chains, staring at nothing, feeling something fundamental reshaping inside him. All his life he had endured, had bent but not broken, had kept his humanity despite everything designed to strip it away. He had done this for Ruth and Ezekiel, for his family, for the hope that maybe, somehow, they could stay together until freedom came. But there was no freedom coming. There was no staying together. Master Whitmore had proved that today. Isaiah had no power, no rights, no ability to protect anything. His strength meant nothing. His years of loyal service meant nothing. His love for his son meant nothing. He was property. His family was property. And property could be sold whenever the owner needed cash. This was the truth of slavery, the fundamental truth. You could not protect anything. You could not keep anything. Everything you loved could be destroyed on a white man's whim. Isaiah had known this intellectually. All enslaved people knew it. But he had believed, had hoped, had desperately wanted to believe that if he was strong enough, good enough, valuable enough, maybe they would leave his family alone. He had been wrong. And in the chains and darkness of that cabin, something broke in Isaiah. Not his spirit would never break, but something else, some final restraint, some last connection to the system that enslaved him. He had tried to be human within slavery, had tried to maintain dignity, maintain family, maintain hope, But slavery didn't allow humanity. That was the point. It wasn't enough to control your body. It had to control your soul. Had to make you accept that you deserved this, that you were less than human, that you had no right to family, to love, to dignity. And if you wouldn't accept that, slavery would take everything from you until you did. But what if, instead of breaking you, that just made you monstrous? What if, instead of accepting their verdict that you were less than human, you became something more, something they couldn't control, something they should have feared all along? Isaiah sat in the darkness, wrapped in chains, and felt the last vestiges of the man he had been burning away. What emerged in its place was something colder, harder, something that had calculated the cost and decided it was worth paying. He could not get Ezekiel back, that was clear. Doyle was already dozens of miles away. By morning, he would be out of Georgia entirely, gone forever. But Isaiah could do one thing. He could make sure the men who did this paid. Master Whitmore, Overseer Thornton, Trader Doyle. Every white man who participated in this atrocity, he could kill them all. He would die for it, of course. They would hunt him down and hang him. But maybe that was fine. Maybe death was better than another 20 years of this. Maybe dying free, covered in the blood of his enemies, was better than dying old and broken in chains. And maybe, just maybe, other enslaved people would hear the story, would know that one man fought back, killed his oppressors, refused to accept this. Maybe that would inspire someone else, until the whole rotten system came down. Or maybe not. Maybe it would change nothing. But Isaiah would die knowing he struck back, that he took some of them with him, that he didn't go quietly. That was enough. The next morning, Thornton came to check on them. Opened the cabin door. Isaiah was still sitting against the wall, chains wrapped around him. Ruth was curled in the corner, staring at nothing. "You settled down yet, boy?" Thornton asked. Isaiah said nothing. "I asked you a question." Isaiah looked up, met Thornton's eyes. The overseer saw something there that made his hand move toward his whip. "Master wants you back in the fields tomorrow. Think you can handle that without causing trouble?" Isaiah's voice was flat, dead. "Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, sir." Thornton studied him. "You look different. You ain't gonna try nothing stupid, are you?" "No, sir." "Because if you do, I'll whip you so hard you'll wish you was dead. And then I'll whip her." He jerked his chin toward Ruth. "And I'll enjoy every second of it." Isaiah said nothing. Thornton left the chains on, but removed the ones around Isaiah's chest so he could breathe properly. "One more day in here, then back to work. And Isaiah? That boy's gone. He ain't coming back. You need to accept that and move on. Plenty more negress on this plantation. Master'll give you another one to breed with." He left. Ruth finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Isaiah, what we gonna do?" Isaiah looked at her, really looked at her, saw the bruises on her face, the blood dried on her chin, the emptiness in her eyes. This woman who had been his partner, his wife in all ways that mattered, for 7 years, who had given him a son, who had made this hell bearable. "I'm going to kill them," he said quietly. "What?" "Thornton, Master Whitmore, Doyle if I can find him, all of them. I'm going to kill every white man on this plantation." "Isaiah, no, they'll kill you." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I can't live like this anymore. Can't wake up every day and pretend this is acceptable. Can't bow and scrape to man who stole my son. Can't," his voice cracked slightly, "can't be a man and accept what they did." Ruth crawled toward him.
put her hands on his face. "I need you. I can't lose you too. If you die, you already lost me, lost the man I was. He died yesterday when they took Ezekiel. What left is something else." Tears streamed down Ruth's face. "Please, please don't do this." "I have to." "Why? It won't bring Ezekiel back." "No, but maybe, somewhere, he'll hear what his papa did. Hear that I didn't accept it, that I fought, that I died fighting." Isaiah's voice grew stronger. "And maybe that will help him. Help him remember he comes from warriors, that his people fought back, that we weren't just victims." Ruth sobbed against his chest. "When?" "Soon. Week, maybe. Need to plan. Need to be smart. They'll torture you before they kill you. You know that." "I know. And me. They'll punish me too. Might kill me too." Isaiah hadn't thought about that. His hand trembled as he touched her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't." "I know." Ruth pulled back, wiped her eyes. When she looked at him again, something had changed in her expression. Something hard. "Then do it right. Kill 'em all, every single one. Make 'em pay for what they took from us." Isaiah stared at her. "You understand what you sayin'?" "Yes, they took my baby. If you gon' die, if I'm going to die, make it count. Make 'em afraid. Make every master in Georgia look over his shoulder at night." They sat in silence. Two people who had nothing left to lose, making a pact that would drench the plantation in blood. Outside, the spring day was beautiful. Birds singing, flowers blooming. The kind of day that made white people write poetry about the gentle South.
The cabin, two people were planning a massacre. The next morning, Thornton removed Isaiah's chains and sent him back to the fields. Watched him carefully for any sign of rebellion. Saw none. Isaiah worked like always. Quiet, efficient, obedient. Perfect. Thornton relaxed. Told you he'd get over it. They always do. But other enslaved people noticed the change. Isaiah's eyes were different. His movements were different. There was a stillness to him that hadn't been there before. The stillness of a predator, of something dangerous waiting for the right moment. Uncle Josiah, the old man who had survived the Stono Rebellion 60 years ago, watched Isaiah work and felt a chill. He had seen this before. In 1739, when the enslaved people in South Carolina had risen up, burned plantations, killed 23 white people before being hunted down and executed. He had been 10 years old, had watched men transform from slaves into warriors. Isaiah had that look, that same transformation. After work, Josiah found Isaiah alone by the creek. "I know what you plannin'." Isaiah didn't deny it. "How?" "Because I was there. 1739, Stono. I was just a boy, but I remember. Remember the look in the men's eyes before they rose up. You got that look. You gonna tell?" "Hell no, but I'm gonna ask you to be smart. Stono failed because we wasn't organized. We killed, yes, but we had no plan for after. The white folks hunted us down like animals, killed 70 of us, put our heads on pikes along the road." Isaiah listened. "If you do this," Josiah continued, "do it smart. Don't just lash out. Plan it. Every detail. Who dies first? How you escape after? Where you go? The Okefenokee Swamp is 30 miles east. 700 square miles of wilderness. They can't track you there. Bloodhounds won't go into those waters. Too many gators. Can't run. I'm too big. Too visible. Then hide. There are places in the swamp where people can live. Maroon communities. Escaped slaves been living there." "For decades. Find them. Join them." Isaiah considered this. What if I don't want to hide? What if I want to fight? Josiah sighed. Then you gonna die, and maybe that's what you want. But think about this. Every day you alive and free is a victory. Every day you free, you a symbol to others. Show them it possible that not all of us die in chains. I'll think about it. You do that. Josiah stood to leave, then turned back. Isaiah, whoever you kill, make it count. Don't waste your life on the small fish. Kill the ones that matter, the ones whose death will mean something. After Josiah left, Isaiah sat by the creek and thought. The old man was right. If he was going to do this, do it properly, not a mindless rampage, a calculated strike, maximum impact. Master Whitmore, absolutely. He gave the order to sell Ezekiel. Overseer Thornton, yes, years of torture, years of cruelty. Trader Doyle, if possible. He actually took Ezekiel away. Mistress Whitmore, maybe. She had pushed for selling slaves to cover debts. Silas the driver, definitely. Traitor to his own people. Any patrollers or overseers who got in the way? But how to kill them? Isaiah was strong, yes, but he was unarmed, closely watched, chained at night. How does an enslaved man kill 7 armed white people? The answer came to him slowly. His strength, that was the weapon. He didn't need knives or guns. His hands could crush a man's skull. His arms could snap necks like twigs. His size and power were the only weapons he needed. But he needed to get close, needed opportunities, needed to catch them when they were vulnerable. And he needed to be unchained. Isaiah had been chained every night for 2 years. Thornton didn't trust him. The chains were good quality iron, thick links, heavy padlocks, impossible to break. Or were they? Isaiah looked down at his hands, hands that could lift 400 pounds, hands that had bent iron tools when working, hands that had broken axe handles by gripping too hard. Could those hands break chains? Only one way to find out. That night, after everyone was asleep, Isaiah tested his chains. Quietly, carefully, he gripped one link and pulled. The metal dug into his palms, drawing blood. He pulled harder. Nothing. Harder. The link groaned. A tiny sound, barely audible. He released it, breathing hard. It had flexed, just slightly, just enough to give him hope. Poor quality iron, cheap chains, made by the lowest bidder, designed to restrain normal men. Isaiah was not a normal man. Over the next week, he worked on the chains, little by little, testing his strength, learning where the weak points were, which links had flaws in the forging, where the iron was thinnest. He also watched, observed patterns. Master Whitmore went to his study every night at 9, drank bourbon until 11, then staggered to bed, alone. The mistress slept in a separate room. He locked his study door, but the window didn't latch properly. Thornton lived in a cabin 200 yards from the slave quarters, kept a rifle by his bed, but he was a heavy sleeper, and he lived alone. No wife, no family, just him and his rifle and his whip. Silas slept in a cabin near the other enslaved people. They hated him, but he had Master Whitmore's protection. He believed that made him safe. He was wrong. Doyle was the difficult one. He was long gone, south to Mississippi or Louisiana. But Josiah had news. Doyle made a circuit, same route every 3 months, would be back in June to buy more slaves. Isaiah could wait until June, could plan for 3 months, could be patient. But inside, the rage was growing. The silence he had felt when Ezekiel was taken was filling up with something hot and violent.
He was becoming something else, something dangerous. Ruth saw it. "You different," she said one night. "You look at me, but you don't see me, like you already gone." "Part of me is," Isaiah admitted. "Part of me died with Ezekiel. What left is something else. Something that
Can kill? Yes. Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'm glad. Kill them all, Isaiah. Every last one." 2 weeks after Ezekiel was taken, Isaiah broke his first chain. It took him 2 hours of silent, agonizing effort, pulling until the muscles in his arms screamed, pulling until he felt something tear in his shoulder, pulling until the iron cut his palms to ribbons. But the link cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. He worked it back and forth until it snapped. 1 chain broken, 3 more to go. April 1st, 1849. 2 weeks until the night of blood. Isaiah had broken all his chains, carefully, slowly, over 3 weeks of night work. But he hadn't removed them. He kept the broken chains on, hiding the breaks with careful positioning. To anyone looking, he appeared still properly secured, but he could snap them off in seconds. He had also been collecting tools, small things. A cotton hook from the field hidden under his cabin's floorboards. A length of rope. A knife stolen from the kitchen, passed to him by a house slave who understood what was coming. And he had been training. Every night, after everyone slept, he would practice movements, fast movements, attack sequences. How to kill silently, how to kill quickly. He practiced on fence posts, on trees, visualizing human bodies, imagining Thornton's neck, Master Whitmore's skull. Other enslaved people knew something was coming. They could feel it. The air felt charged, dangerous. Some avoided Isaiah, frightened of what he was becoming. Others sought him out, asked questions with their eyes. "Are you really going to do it? Are you going to fight back?" Isaiah told no one his exact plans. The fewer who knew, the fewer who could be tortured for information after. But his answer to those silent questions was always the same. Yes, someone is finally going to fight back. 6 men approached Isaiah over those 2 weeks, all field hands, all strong, all tired of living in hell. They wanted to help, wanted to be part of whatever was coming. Isaiah considered refusing. This was his vengeance, his death sentence. Why drag others down with him? But then he remembered Josiah's words about Stono. Organization mattered. Support mattered. He accepted their help, but with conditions. When it starts, you defend yourselves if attacked. You help others escape if possible. But the killing? That's mine. That's my burden, my death sentence. I won't put that on you. They agreed. 6 men, including Isaiah, ready to risk everything. They planned in whispers, in coded language, in quick conversations that looked innocent but communicated everything. The timing had to be perfect. A stormy night would be best. Sound cover for violence, darkness for escape. But spring in Georgia was unpredictable. They might not get a storm when needed. So Isaiah chose a date, April 2nd, the night before Easter Sunday. The plantation would be preparing for holiday. White folks would be distracted. Some would be drinking. Guards would be relaxed. And, symbolically, Easter, the resurrection, death and rebirth. Isaiah would die as a slave and be reborn as something else, even if only for one night. The 6 men agreed, April 2nd, just after midnight. That gave them one more day to prepare, one more day to settle their souls, one more day before everything changed. April 2nd, 1849, the last day of Isaiah's life as a slave. He woke before dawn as always, looked at Ruth sleeping beside him, memorized her face. He hadn't told her exactly when. Better she didn't know. Better she could claim ignorance when they questioned her after. He went to the fields, worked like always, efficient, quiet, but his mind was elsewhere, running through the plan, over and over, every step, every contingency. Step 1, break chains, silent, quick. Step 2, exit cabin, avoid Silas's cabin. He would come back for Silas later. Step 3, big house, Master Whitmore first, the head of the snake. Step 4, Overseer Thornton, the butcher must die. 5. Mistress Whitmore if she interferes. Step 6, back to quarters. Kill Silas, the traitor pays. Step 7, deal with any patrollers or overseers who respond. Step 8, run for Okefenokee, 30 miles, through darkness, hunted by dogs and men. He would probably die before reaching the swamp, probably be shot down or captured and hanged, but he would take as many with him as possible. That was the plan. Simple, brutal, almost certainly fatal. Perfect. The day passed slowly. Isaiah forced himself to eat at noon, though he had no appetite. Forced himself to continue working, though every muscle wanted to run, to fight, to kill now. Patience. Wait for darkness. Wait for the right moment. Finally, the horn sounded. End of work. The enslaved people trudged back to their quarters. Isaiah walked with them, his massive form moving through the twilight like a dark mountain. Ruth had prepared food, cornmeal mush. He ate mechanically. She watched him, sensing something. Isaiah? Yeah? You look different. Something happening tonight. He didn't answer directly. Instead, Ruth, I love you. Whatever happens, remember that. Her eyes widened. Tonight? It's tonight? Don't know what you talking about. Isaiah! Listen to me. His voice was low, urgent. When things get loud, you stay in this cabin. You lock the door. You tell anyone who asks that you was sleeping. You heard nothing, you saw nothing. You understand? Tears filled her eyes. You're gonna die. Probably. Then let me die with you. No, you survive. You live. You remember Ezekiel. You remember me. You tell our story if you get the chance. That's how you fight. By surviving. By remembering. By making sure they can't erase us. She grabbed his face, kissed him, hard, desperate, a goodbye kiss. I love you. I will always love you. I know. I love you too. They sat together until dark, not talking, just being together one last time. Outside, night fell. The quarters settled down. Fires dimmed. Voices quieted. Plantation prepared for sleep. Isaiah waited, watched through the gaps in the cabin wall, watched the big house lights go out one by one, watched Thornton's cabin go dark, watched the patrollers make their rounds. Around 11, everything was quiet. The plantation slept. Isaiah stood. Ruth looked up at him, her face wet with tears. It's time, he said. She nodded, couldn't speak. Isaiah touched her face one last time. Then he turned to his chains, gripped the first one, the one around his right wrist, the link he had spent 3 weeks weakening. He pulled. The metal groaned softly. He twisted. The link snapped. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin, like a gunshot. He froze, listened. No movement outside, no shouts, no alarm. He continued. Left wrist, snap. Ankles, snap, snap. The chains fell away. After 2 years of being chained every night, he was free. He retrieved the cotton hook from under the floorboards. 8 inches of curved, sharpened steel. Not much, but enough. And he had his hands, his strength. That was all he needed. He moved to the door. Ruth grabbed his hand one last time. Give them hell. I will.
Isaiah opened the door, stepped into the night. The spring air was cool, smelled of earth and growing things. Somewhere an owl hooted. The quarter was silent, everyone sleeping. Isaiah moved like a shadow despite his size. Years of moving through these quarters had taught him where every board creaked, where every dog slept. He avoided Silas's cabin. The trader could wait. First, the master. Isaiah crossed the open space between the quarters and the big house. 200 yards of vulnerability. If a patroller saw him, this would end before it began. But the patrollers had finished their rounds. They wouldn't check again until dawn. He reached the big house. The white edifice loomed above him, symbol of everything that had destroyed his life. He moved to the side, to Master Whitmore's study window, the one that didn't latch properly. He tested it. Gently. It opened, silent, easy. Isaiah pulled himself through. His massive frame barely fit, but he squeezed through, into the study. The smell hit him immediately. Bourbon, tobacco, expensive things. The smell of wealth built on suffering. Isaiah moved to the desk, to the stairs beyond. Master Whitmore's bedroom was on the second floor, alone, vulnerable. Isaiah climbed the stairs, each step careful, silent. His heart was pounding now. This was really happening, no turning back. He reached the second-floor hallway, saw the door to Whitmore's bedroom, saw light underneath. The master was awake, reading probably, or too drunk to sleep. Isaiah gripped the cotton hook tighter, approached the door, put his hand on the knob, turned it slowly. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? What slave would dare enter the master's bedroom? The door opened. Isaiah stepped inside. Master Cornelius Whitmore III sat in his bed, propped against pillows, reading a book by candlelight. He looked up at the sound of the door opening, saw Isaiah. His mouth fell open. For a moment, they just stared at each other, master and slave, oppressor and oppressed. Two men who had known each other for 22 years, but had never truly seen each other until this moment. Isaiah? Whitmore's voice was confused, not frightened yet. What are you doing here? Why aren't you chained? Isaiah closed the door behind him, locked it. The click of the lock was loud in the quiet room. Whitmore's eyes widened. He saw the cotton hook, saw Isaiah's expression, finally understood. Now, wait just a moment. We can talk about this, if you're upset about the boy. His name was Ezekiel. Isaiah's voice was soft, deadly. My son's name was Ezekiel. Yes, Ezekiel. Look, I understand you're upset, but violence won't solve. You understand nothing. Isaiah moved forward. Whitmore scrambled back in his bed, reaching for the nightstand, reaching for a pistol. Isaiah was faster. He lunged forward, grabbed Whitmore by the throat with one hand, slammed him back against the headboard. The pistol clattered to the floor. Whitmore clawed at Isaiah's hand. Can't breathe. Good. Isaiah lifted him effortlessly, held him against the wall with one arm. You took my son. You killed my wife. You've stolen 22 years of my life. Now you pay. Please. Did Ezekiel say please? Did Ruth? Did any of us ever matter to you? Whitmore's face was turning purple. His struggles were weakening. Isaiah watched him die. Watched those blue eyes bulge. Watched the blood vessels burst. Watched the life drain out. It took 4 minutes, 4 long minutes of choking, of suffering, of knowing death was coming and being unable to stop it. When Master Whitmore finally went limp, Isaiah held him for another minute, making sure.
Then he dropped the body. It crumpled to the floor. Isaiah stood over his master's corpse, felt nothing, no satisfaction, no regret, just emptiness, and the knowledge that this was just beginning. He retrieved the pistol from the floor, checked it, loaded, good. Now he was armed. He left the bedroom, moved down the hallway, toward the mistress's room. The night of blood had begun, and Isaiah, the man they called Ironback, would not stop until every one of them was dead. If your heart is pounding right now, if you're feeling the weight of this moment, you should. This happened. Not these exact names, not this exact plantation, but stories like this happened throughout the South. Enslaved people who finally snapped, who decided that death fighting was better than life in chains. The history books don't tell you about most of them, but they existed. They fought, they killed, and sometimes they escaped. Isaiah moved down the hall toward Mistress Whitmore's room, his bare feet silent on the wooden floor, the pistol heavy in his hand, the cotton hook in the other. He reached her door, listened, heard soft breathing. She was asleep. He opened the door, stepped inside. The mistress's room was decorated elaborately. Silk curtains, expensive furniture, all bought with cotton, with slavery, with blood. Constance Whitmore lay in her bed, a lace sleeping cap on her head, peaceful, unaware that death was standing in her room. Isaiah approached the bed, stood over her, looked down at this woman who had burned house slaves with hat pins, who had sold children to punish their parents, who had lived in luxury while people died in her fields. She stirred, some instinct sensing danger. Her eyes opened, saw Isaiah standing there. She opened her mouth to scream. Isaiah clamped his hand over her face, quiet. Her eyes were wide with terror. She tried to bite his hand. He didn't flinch. "Your husband is dead," Isaiah said softly. "I killed him with my hands. Same hands that picked your cotton. Same hands that built your wealth." She thrashed beneath him. He held her easily. 26 years of field work versus a woman who had never done physical labor in her life. "You sold my son. You destroyed my family. Now I destroy yours." He placed the pistol against her temple. She went still, stared up at him with eyes full of terror and incomprehension. How could this be happening? How could a slave be here, in her room, holding a gun to her head? Isaiah hesitated, not from mercy, but from calculation. A gunshot would wake the plantation, would bring people running. He wasn't finished yet. He set the pistol aside, picked up a pillow instead. Constance Whitmore's eyes widened further. She knew what was coming. Isaiah pressed the pillow over her face, held it there with both hands. She fought harder than her husband had, desperation giving her strength. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. 3 minutes. She lasted 3 minutes before her body went limp. Isaiah lifted the pillow, looked at her face, frozen in fear. He felt nothing, just the same emptiness. 2 down, 5 to go. He left the big house through the same window he'd entered, dropped the ground, looked around. Still quiet, still dark. Clouds were rolling in. Maybe there would be a storm after all. Isaiah moved toward Thornton's cabin. The overseer, the butcher, the man who had tortured him for 8 years, who had whipped Ruth to death. This one, Isaiah would make suffer. The cabin was small, isolated from the other buildings. Thornton liked his privacy, liked being away from the smell of the slaves. That isolation would be his downfall. Isaiah reached the door. It was locked. He didn't bother with subtlety, reared back and kicked. The door splintered inward with a crack of breaking wood. Inside, Thornton bolted awake, grabbed for his rifle by the bed, got his hands on it, raised it, fired. The shot went wide, too dark, too sudden. The bullet splintered the doorframe a foot from Isaiah's head. Isaiah lunged forward, crossed the room in 3 massive strides, grabbed the rifle before Thornton could reload, ripped it from his hands, threw it across the room. Thornton swung a fist, connected with Isaiah's jaw. Isaiah's head barely moved. Thornton's hand, however, probably broke. He screamed. Isaiah grabbed him by the throat, lifted him off the bed, slammed him against the wall. The cabin shook. "Remember me?" Isaiah's voice was a growl. 8 years you've whipped me. 8 years of scars. 8 years of suffering. Thornton clawed at Isaiah's hand. "Let go!" 2 weeks ago, you whipped my wife. 50 lashes. She died 3 hours later. Remember that? Had to. She was fighting. You enjoyed it. I saw your face. You smiled. Isaiah threw Thornton across the room. The overseer crashed into his own desk. Wood splintered. Thornton tried to stand. Isaiah was on him, grabbed him by the hair, dragged him toward the door, out into the night. Thornton screamed, "Help! Someone!" Isaiah punched him in the stomach. All air left Thornton's lungs. He couldn't scream, could barely breathe. Isaiah dragged him across the yard, toward the whipping post. The same post where he had delivered hundreds of lashes, where he had tortured countless enslaved people, where Ruth had been whipped to death. Isaiah threw Thornton against the post. The overseer slumped, gasping for air. Isaiah grabbed the chains that hung from the post, the same chains used to bind slaves during whippings. He wrapped them around Thornton's wrists, pulled them tight, lifted Thornton's arms above his head, left him hanging, toes barely touching the ground. Thornton's breath was coming back. "You crazy Negro! They gonna hang you! They gonna—" Isaiah punched him in the face. Thornton's head snapped back. Blood poured from his broken nose. "You said you wanted to hear me scream," Isaiah said. "Make me break, remember? Well, tonight you scream for me." He went to the overseer's cabin, retrieved Thornton's own whip from inside. The same whip used on Isaiah 73 times. The same whip used on Ruth. Isaiah returned to the post. Thornton saw the whip. His eyes widened with true terror. "No, no, please." Did anyone's pleas ever matter to you? Isaiah drew back the whip, brought it down across Thornton's back. The crack echoed across the plantation. Thornton screamed. Isaiah struck again, again, again. Each blow delivered with 26 years of accumulated rage. Each strike was for every scar on his own back, for Ruth, for Ezekiel, for every person who had suffered under this man's cruelty. Blood sprayed with each impact. Thornton's shirt was shredded in seconds. His skin tore. The screams continued, high-pitched, desperate. The screams of a man who had inflicted agony on others, but never experienced it himself. Isaiah lost count of the lashes. 20, 40, 60. He didn't stop, couldn't stop. This man had to pay, had to suffer, had to know what he had done to others. Thornton's screams weakened, became whimpers, then silence. He had passed out from the pain. Isaiah stopped, breathing hard, looked at his handiwork. Thornton's back was destroyed. A mass of blood and torn flesh, bones visible in places. But he was still alive, still breathing, still clinging to life. Not for long. Isaiah dropped the whip, grabbed Thornton's head with both hands. One simple motion, a twist, a crack like breaking wood. Thornton's neck snapped. His body went limp. Isaiah released him. The overseer's body hung from the chains, head at an unnatural angle. Dead. 3 down. Isaiah turned. The plantation was waking now. Lights appeared in windows. Shouts echoed. The gunshot had been heard. The screams had been heard. People were coming. Good. Let them come. Isaiah moved back toward the slave quarters, toward Silas's cabin. The traitor needed to die before the fighting started in earnest. But as he approached the quarters, he saw movement. Enslaved people emerging from their cabins. Not running, not hiding, standing, waiting. Uncle Josiah stepped forward. In his hand, a broken hoe handle, weapon enough. "We heard," the old man said. "We know what you doin'. We with you." Behind him, more people emerged. 20, 30, 40. Men and women. Some holding improvised weapons. Some just standing with empty hands. Isaiah looked at them. His people, who had lived in fear for so long, who were now standing up, ready to fight, ready to risk everything. "I didn't want to bring you into this," Isaiah said. "You didn't," Josiah replied. "We choosen. For once in our lives, we choosen." A woman stepped forward, old, scarred. "They sold my 3 children. I want to help." Another man. "My wife died in the fields. They worked her to death. I want to fight." More voices, more stories, more rage. Generations of rage, suddenly finding focus. Isaiah nodded slowly. "Silas first, the traitor. Then we defend ourselves. Anyone comes at us, we fight back. Anyone runs, let them. Anyone wants to join, welcome them. But understand this, we probably all gonna die today. They will hunt us. They will kill us. Is that worth it to you?" "Yes," came the chorus. From dozens of throats, yes. Isaiah turned toward Silas's cabin. The 6 men who had agreed to help weeks ago moved with him. Others followed. Silas must have heard the commotion. He emerged from his cabin, saw the crowd approaching. His face went pale. "Now, wait," he started. "No waiting," said a young field hand named Jacob. "You sent my brother to the whipping post. He died from the infection. I was just doing my job." "You were saving your own skin," spat an older woman. "You betrayed us over and over." Silas tried to run. The crowd blocked him, surrounded him. He spun, looking for escape, found none. Isaiah stepped through the crowd, looked down at Silas. "You had a choice. We all had hard choices. But you chose to hurt your own people, to get ahead by keeping us down. That's worse than what the white men do. They enemies. You traitor. Please." Ruth's last word was please. Didn't help her. Isaiah grabbed Silas by the throat, lifted him off the ground. The traitor's eyes bulged, his feet kicked uselessly. "Let everyone do it," said Josiah. "Let everyone who he wronged have a piece of justice." Isaiah looked around, saw faces filled with hate, with need, with the desperate desire for justice that had been denied for so long. He set Silas down, but held him. 1 strike each. Make it count. They lined up. 20 people who Silas had betrayed, who he had sent to the whipping post, whose family members he had gotten sold or killed. One by one, they struck him. Fists, sticks, stones. Each blow delivered with years of accumulated hatred. Silas screamed, begged, cried. No one listened. When they were finished, Silas lay in the dirt, barely recognizable, barely alive.
gasping, broken. Isaiah knelt beside him. Die knowing your own people did this. Die knowing you earned every bit of it. Silas's eyes glazed over. His breathing stopped. The traitor was dead. 4 down. Shouts came from the direction of the big house. "Master Whitmore! Mistress Whitmore! They're dead!"
They're dead!
The remaining overseers and patrollers were discovering the bodies. Isaiah counted quickly. 2 overseers slept in the barn. 4 patrollers operated on the plantation. 6 armed white men, plus however many others were nearby. "Get weapons," Isaiah ordered. "Anything you can use, tools, rocks, whatever." The enslaved people scattered, returned with implements. Hoes, axes, hammers, pitchforks, knives, an arsenal of desperation. "Barricade the quarters," Josiah suggested. "Make them come to us." But Isaiah shook his head. "No, we're not defending. We're not waiting to be slaughtered. We're attacking. We're taking the fight to them." "That's suicide," someone protested. "Maybe, but better to die fighting than die cowering. And if we hit them hard, hit them fast, maybe we can break through. Run for the swamp. Some of us might make it." There was a moment of silence. Then Jacob spoke. "I'm with you. Rather die on my feet." Others echoed the sentiment. Not everyone. Some melted back into the cabins, choosing to hide, to claim ignorance. Isaiah didn't blame them. Survival took many forms. But 40 stayed. 40 people ready to fight. "Stay together," Isaiah instructed. "Watch each other's backs. Kill anyone who attacks. If you get a chance to run, take it. Don't die for pride. Survive if you can." Thunder rumbled overhead. The storm was coming. Perfect. Isaiah led the group toward the big house, toward the sound of voices, toward the confrontation that would end in either freedom or death. They rounded the barn, saw the 2 overseers emerging, rifles in hand, saw 4 patrollers on horseback, whips and pistols ready, saw several white neighbors who had responded to the commotion, armed with shotguns. 10 armed white men facing 40 unarmed enslaved people. The odds should have favored the white men. Guns against farming tools, training against desperation. But the white men had never faced enslaved people who had decided they had nothing left to lose. One
Of the overseers raised his rifle. "You niggers stop right there! Get on the ground or we shoot!" Isaiah kept walking. "No, I'm warning you." Isaiah threw the cotton hook. It spun through the air, embedded itself in the overseer's throat. The man dropped his rifle, clutched his neck. Blood poured between his fingers. He fell. 5 down. The other overseer fired. The shot went over Isaiah's head. Before he could reload, 3 enslaved people were on him. A hoe to the head, an axe to the chest. He went down screaming. 6 down. The patrollers charged on horseback, whips cracking, pistols firing. 2 enslaved people fell, shot dead. 3 more went down under the hooves and whips, but the rest surged forward, pulled a patroller from his horse, descended on him with knives and stones. He died quickly. 7 down. Isaiah grabbed a patroller's horse by the bridle, stopped it cold. The rider tried to shoot him point blank. Isaiah caught his wrist, twisted, bones cracked. The pistol fell. Isaiah pulled the man from the saddle, threw him to the ground, stomped on his head. Once, twice, the skull caved in. 8 down. The remaining patrollers retreated. The white neighbors fired their shotguns. More enslaved people fell. The air was filled with gunpowder smoke and screams and the smell of blood. Isaiah charged the nearest neighbor. The man was reloading. Didn't have time. Isaiah grabbed him by the shoulders, lifted him, threw him into the side of the barn. The impact was sickening. The man slid down, leaving a blood smear on the white wood. 9 down. But the cost was high.
Isaiah looked around. 10 of their people were down, dead or wounded. The others were engaged in desperate fights, outnumbered individually, but together overwhelming the white men through sheer numbers and rage. A patroller on horseback tried to ride down Jacob. The young field hand dove aside, came up with a pitchfork, jammed it into the horse's belly. The animal screamed, reared, threw its rider. Man hit the ground hard, didn't get up. 10 down. Thunder crashed overhead. Rain began to fall. Cold spring rain that turned the dirt to mud and mixed with the blood soaking the ground. Isaiah saw movement at the big house. More white men arriving, neighbors, overseers from nearby plantations. The gunshots had carried. Help was coming. Too many. They couldn't win this fight, not with more armed men arriving every minute. "Run!" Isaiah shouted. "Those who can, run now! East, to the swamp! Go!" Some listened, broke away from the fighting, ran into the darkness, rain and night covering their escape. Isaiah saw Josiah among them, the old man moving surprisingly fast despite his years. Good. Some would survive. Some would escape. The rest fought on. Some because they were trapped. Some because they chose to. Some because they had waited their whole lives for this moment and wouldn't waste it, even if it meant death. Isaiah saw Ruth emerge from their cabin. No, she was supposed to stay inside, stay safe, but she was running toward him, holding something. His vision cleared through the rain. She was holding an axe. "I'm not letting you die alone!" she screamed over the thunder. A white man on horseback charged at her, rifle raised. Isaiah roared, sprinted, but he was too far, too slow. The rifle fired. Ruth spun. Blood bloomed on her chest. She fell. "No!" Isaiah reached the horseman, grabbed him, pulled him from the saddle with such force the man's arm dislocated. Isaiah slammed him into the ground, picked him up, slammed him again, until the body was pulp. He crawled to Ruth, gathered her in his arms. Blood poured from the wound in her chest. Bullet must have hit her lung. She was drowning in her own blood. "Isaiah," she gasped, You did it. You fought. Don't talk. Save your strength." "No." She coughed, blood on her lips. "No. Saving. I'm glad I saw you free, even if just for one night. Ruth, please, tell Ezekiel if you find him. Tell him we loved him. Tell him we fought." "I will, I swear." Her eyes dimmed. Her breathing stopped. Ruth was gone. Isaiah held her, rocked her. Something inside him shattered completely. First Ezekiel, now Ruth. Everyone he loved, destroyed. But he was still alive, still here, still able to kill. He laid Ruth gently on the ground, stood, looked around at the chaos, at the bodies, at the fire that had started in the barn. Lightning strike or fallen lantern didn't matter. At the plantation burning, at the white men still coming. Isaiah picked up a fallen rifle, checked it, loaded. He knew how to shoot, had watched white men often enough. He fired. A man fell. Reloaded, fired again, another down. But there were too many, and more coming. Horses thundering in from neighboring plantations, dogs barking. The manhunt was beginning. Isaiah looked east, toward the swamp. 30 miles. He could make it. He was strong enough, fast enough. He ran. Behind him, the Whitmore plantation burned. The big house was engulfed now, the flames climbing into the rainy sky. Screams and gunshots and chaos. An entire world collapsing. Isaiah ran through cotton fields, past the rows he had planted, past the acres of white gold built on black suffering. His feet pounded the earth. His massive legs carried him faster than any man his size should be able to move. Behind him, the dogs were released, bloodhounds, trained to track runaways. Their baying carried through the rain. Isaiah didn't slow, couldn't slow, had to reach the swamp, had to disappear into that wilderness where they couldn't follow. He ran for an hour, through fields and forest, across creeks and through thickets. His body was a machine built for endurance. 26 years of brutal labor had made him nearly unstoppable. But the dogs were gaining, and the men, dozens of them now, armed, angry, hunting. Isaiah reached a creek, stopped, caught his breath, thought fast. Dogs track by scent. Water breaks scent trails.
He waded into the creek, moved downstream, fast as he could through waist-deep water. The current fought him, but he powered through. Half a mile downstream, he emerged, ran again. The baying of the dogs faded slightly. He had bought time. The rain intensified, a full storm now, lightning cracking the sky, thunder shaking the earth. Isaiah ran through it like a force of nature himself. Dawn was approaching. He could see the eastern sky lightening. He had been running for hours, had covered maybe 20 miles, 10 more to the swamp. But the dogs found his trail again. Closer now, much closer. Isaiah's lungs burned, his legs ached. Even his tremendous strength had limits. But he pushed on, had to, for Ruth, for Ezekiel, for everyone who had died tonight. He would not be captured, would not give them the satisfaction. He heard horses, saw torches through the trees. They had caught up. Isaiah drew the rifle. He had 3 shots left, took aim, fired. A torch fell, a scream. Fired again. A horse went down. 1 shot left. He kept running, but he was slowing. The adrenaline was fading, the exhaustion creeping in. The dogs burst from the trees, 3 bloodhounds, slavering and vicious, trained to attack, not just track. Isaiah turned, raised the rifle. The first dog leaped. He fired. The dog dropped in midair, but the other 2 were on him. One clamped onto his leg. The other went for his throat. Isaiah dropped the rifle, grabbed the dog going for his throat, threw it against a tree. Its back broke, but the one on his leg was tearing through muscle. Isaiah grabbed it by the scruff, pulled. The dog's teeth ripped flesh as it came away. Isaiah snapped its neck. But the damage was done. His left leg was mauled. Blood poured from the wounds. He could barely stand. The horses arrived, men with rifles, 10 of them, surrounding him. A man dismounted, plantation owner from a nearby property. Isaiah had seen him before. Colonel Beauregard, rich, powerful, angry. "You killed 17
"What people tonight?" Beauregard said. 17? That's a record, boy. Congratulations. You're about to be the most famous hanged Negro in Georgia history. Isaiah said nothing, just stood there, bleeding, surrounded, but unbroken. "Tie 'em up," Beauregard ordered. "We're taking 'em back. The county needs to see what happens to slaves who rebel." They approached cautiously. Even wounded, Isaiah was terrifying. They brought chains, heavy chains, the kind used for the most dangerous criminals. Isaiah could have fought, could have forced them to shoot him, died here on his feet. But something made him stop, some final calculation. If he died here, in these woods, it would be quick, anonymous. No one would know the full story. But if he went back, if he stood trial, if he was paraded through the county, the story would spread. Every enslaved person in Georgia would hear about Isaiah, who killed 17 white people in one night, who fought back, who chose death as a free man over life as a slave. That story would inspire others, would plant seeds of resistance that would grow over decades. So Isaiah let them chain him. They wrapped him in so many chains he could barely move. Hands, feet, waist, neck, hundreds of pounds of iron. Then they tied him to a horse and marched him back toward the plantation. The sun was rising now. The storm had passed. It was gonna be a beautiful day. Isaiah looked at the sky, thought about Ezekiel somewhere in Mississippi or Louisiana waking up to this same sky. Thought about Ruth lying dead in the mud. Thought about all the people he had killed tonight. Felt no regret, only a strange peace. He had fought. He had killed his oppressors. He had died free, if only for a few hours. That was enough. They didn't take him back to Whitmore Plantation. The place was still burning. So they took him to Valdosta, threw him in a cell in the county jail, chained him to the wall with even more chains, left him in darkness. Isaiah sat in that darkness and waited. News spread fast. 17 white people dead. The Whitmore Plantation destroyed. A slave uprising, the largest since Nat Turner in 1831. Panic swept through the South. Militias were called up. Martial law declared in 3 counties. All enslaved people were subject to immediate curfews and increased patrols. Random hangings of troublemakers occurred across Georgia to send a message. But another message was spreading too, in whispers, in secret meetings, in coded spirituals. Did you hear? One of us fought back, killed 17, fought like a demon, took dozens of them to bring him down. What was his name? Isaiah. They called him Ironback. Said he was big as a mountain and strong as 10 men. Is he dead? Not yet. They gonna try him, hang him public, make an example. He fought, though. He really fought. Yeah, he did. That message was worth everything, worth all the pain, worth the death sentence waiting for him. Isaiah spent 3 weeks in that cell. They didn't torture him, oddly. Maybe afraid of what he might do, even chained. Maybe wanted him intact for the trial and hanging. They did question him, asked for names, who helped him, who planned it, who knew. Isaiah gave them nothing. I did it alone. Broke my chains, killed them. That's all. They didn't believe him, but they couldn't prove otherwise. And most of the enslaved people who had fought were dead or had escaped into the swamp. The survivors who remained claimed ignorance, had been asleep, heard nothing, saw nothing. With no witnesses willing to testify and no evidence beyond Isaiah's obvious guilt, the trial was quick. They held it in the county courthouse, packed with white people, plantation owners, overseers, curious onlookers. This was the trial of the decade, maybe the century. Isaiah was brought in wearing chains, so many chains he could barely walk. They sat him in the defendant's chair. More chains were attached to the floor. The prosecutor stood, described the murders in graphic detail. 17 bodies, 17 white citizens, murdered by this animal. The defense attorney, court-appointed and clearly not interested in actually defending Isaiah, made a half-hearted argument about temporary insanity brought on by the trauma of losing his child. The judge, a plantation owner himself, looked disgusted. The jury deliberated for 7 minutes, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him immediately. Isaiah, also known as Ironback, I sentence you to death by hanging. Sentence to be carried out in 1 week,
in public, so that every slave in this county can see what happens to those who raise their hands against their betters. May God have mercy on your soul, though you deserve none." Isaiah said nothing, just looked at the judge with those same calm, terrible eyes. They took him back to the cell, 1 week until execution. That week, a strange thing happened. Isaiah had visitors, not white people, but free blacks from Valdosta, a few brave souls who risked everything to come to the jail. An old woman brought him food, better food than the jail provided. "You're a hero," she whispered. "Don't let them tell you otherwise." A young man came. "My grandfather was at Stono. He would have been proud to know you." A woman Isaiah's age. "I was born free, but my parents were slaves. Thank you for fighting." They couldn't stay long, too dangerous, but they came, offered what comfort they could, let Isaiah know that some people understood, some people appreciated what he had done. On the night before his execution, Isaiah had one more visitor, Uncle Josiah. The old man had escaped into the swamp with others, but he had risked capture to come back. "Had to see you one more time," Josiah said. "Had to tell you, you inspired us. 23 of us made it to the swamp. We found a maroon community there, free blacks living in hiding. They took us in. We built in a life there." "Good," Isaiah said. His voice was hoarse from disuse. "That's good. We gon' tell your story. Go make sure every slave in Georgia knows about Isaiah Ironback, the man who couldn't be held, the man who fought back." "Tell 'em fight smart," Isaiah said. "Don't throw lives away. But when the time comes, fight. Always fight." Josiah nodded. "We will. And Isaiah, I think freedom comin'. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for years, but it comin'. Men like you push it closer. Every act of resistance pushes it closer." "I hope you're right." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Josiah stood. "Walk proud tomorrow. Show them you ain't afraid. Show them we ain't afraid." "I will." Josiah left. Isaiah was alone again. He spent that final night thinking about Angola, about his mother and father, dead for decades now, about the Middle Passage, about 26 years of slavery, about Ruth and Ezekiel, about freedom, that beautiful, terrible word. He had never been free in America, had been chained from the day he arrived. But for one night, for those few hours between breaking his chains and being captured, he had been free, truly free, master of his own actions, killer of his own oppressors. That was worth everything. April 25th, 1849, Execution Day. They built the gallows in the center of Valdosta, a large platform, room for spectators. This wasn't just an execution. It was theater, a message. Every enslaved person in Lowndes County was ordered to attend, forced to watch, forced to see what happened to those who rebelled. Hundreds of them standing in designated areas, surrounded by armed guards. White spectators numbered in the thousands. They came from Georgia, Alabama, Florida. This was the event of the year, the hanging of Ironback, the slave who killed 17. Isaiah was brought from the jail in a wagon, chains covering his body, 20 armed guards surrounding him. They weren't taking chances. The crowd jeered, threw rotten vegetables, spit, curses. "Animal, monster, devil." Isaiah looked at them calmly. Unafraid. They marched him up the gallows steps. The wood creaked under his weight and the weight of his chains. The executioner, a professional brought in from Charleston, waited at the top. A preacher was there too, offered Isaiah a chance to repent, to accept Jesus, to beg forgiveness for his sins. Isaiah looked at him. I don't want your Jesus. Your Jesus allows slavery. I want the God of my ancestors, the God of Angola. That God knows I did right. The crowd gasped at the blasphemy. The preacher stepped back, looking offended. The judge read the sentence again, for the official record, for the crowd. Isaiah blocked it out, looked instead at the enslaved people being forced to watch, tried to catch their eyes, tried to send a message. Do not be afraid. Do not accept this. Fight when you can. Resist when you can. Live free or die trying. Some met his eyes. Some nodded, almost imperceptibly. They understood. The executioner placed the noose around Isaiah's neck, adjusted it. Professional, efficient. Any last words? The judge asked. Isaiah looked at the crowd, at the plantation owners and overseers and patrollers, at the system that had enslaved millions, at the whole rotten structure of bondage. When he spoke, his voice carried across the square, deep, strong, unbroken. You call me murderer, monster, animal, but how many of us have you killed? Thousands? Millions? How many children stolen from mothers? How many families destroyed? How many lives ground to nothing under your fields? I killed 17 men, 17 guilty men, men who profited from slavery, men who tortured and killed and destroyed. You killed millions of innocent people and call it civilization. I am not sorry. I would do it again, would kill every one of you if I could, because you are not human. You lost your humanity when you put chains on other humans. I die today, but I die free. I die having struck back. I die having shown that we are not sheep to be slaughtered. We are warriors. We are humans, and we will fight. My name is Isaiah. I was born in Angola. I am the son of warriors. The blood of kings runs in my veins. You owned my body for 26 years. You never owned my spirit. You never broke me. And one day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not for decades, but one day your system will fall. The chains will break. The slaves will rise. And when that day comes, when you are running for your lives from the people you oppressed, remember me. Remember Ironback. Remember the man you couldn't hold. Silence. Absolute silence across the square. Even the white people were speechless. The enslaved people stood transfixed. Some were crying. Some were smiling. All were changed. The judge, face red with rage, nodded to the executioner. The executioner pulled the lever. The trapdoor opened. Isaiah fell. The rope went taut. His neck broke instantly. Clean, quick, professional. Isaiah, called Ironback, son of Angola, husband of Ruth, father of Ezekiel, was dead. But his story had just begun. They left his body hanging for 3 days, a warning, a message. But the message received was not the one intended. Among the enslaved people, a different story spread, not about a criminal punished, but about a hero martyred, about a man who fought back, about resistance being possible. Isaiah killed 17. He broke his own chains with his bare hands. He fought like an African warrior. He died unbroken. The stories grew with each telling. Some said he killed 30 white men. Some said 50. Some said he had called down lightning to burn the plantation. Some said his spirit lived on in the Okefenokee swamp, protecting runaways. The truth was powerful enough, but the legend was unstoppable. Songs were written, spirituals with coded lyrics about the man who broke iron and the warrior who walked free. These songs spread from plantation to plantation, carried by enslaved people sold south, by runaways heading north, by everyone who heard the tale. Wade in the water. Water gained a new verse. God's gonna trouble the water. The Ironback man broke his chains. God's gonna trouble the water, and 17 fell like rain. Children born in 1850 were named Isaiah in secret. Women named daughters Ruth. The memory was kept alive. The white reaction was panic. 3 months after Isaiah's execution, Georgia passed the harshest slave codes yet. No gatherings of more than 3 enslaved people. No teaching them to read or write under penalty of death. Increased patrols, harsher punishments, more public whippings and hangings. But it didn't work. Fear, once planted, grows. Every plantation owner in Georgia now slept with a loaded gun. Every overseer walked the fields watching his back. Every white person in the South suddenly realized the truth they had been denying. They were outnumbered, vastly outnumbered, and the only thing keeping millions of enslaved people in chains was fear. But what if the fear went away? What if more people like Isaiah appeared? What if the enslaved population decided collectively that death was preferable to bondage? The whole system would collapse in weeks. That fear drove policy for the next 12 years. Harsher laws, more brutal enforcement, anything to prevent another Isaiah. It didn't work. In 1856, a slave named Margaret Garner in Kentucky killed her own children rather than let them be returned to slavery. Said she was inspired by the Georgia man who chose death over chains. In 1858, a group of enslaved people in Alabama burned 3 plantations in one night, left a note for Ironback. In 1859, John Brown tried to start a slave rebellion at Harper's Ferry. When asked where he got the courage, he mentioned hearing about a slave in Georgia who killed 17 masters. The story spread, north and south, among enslaved and free blacks, among abolitionists. Isaiah became a symbol, proof that resistance was possible, that enslaved people weren't passive victims, that they fought back when they could. When? When the Civil War began in 1861, enslaved people across the South began running to Union lines, joining the Army, fighting their former masters. Some said they were inspired by the story of Ironback. When the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863, then the 13th Amendment in 1865, some said the seeds were planted decades earlier, by people like Nat Turner, by people like Isaiah, by people who said enough. What happened to Ezekiel? No one knows for certain. He would have been 14 when slavery ended, if he survived. The mortality rate for child slaves sold south was over 50%. Maybe he died on a cotton plantation in Mississippi. Maybe he survived to see freedom. Maybe he lived to be an old man, telling his grandchildren about a father he barely remembered, a giant of a man called Ironback who had loved him enough to commit murder. We don't know. But we know the story survived, passed down through generations, changed with each telling, but never forgotten. As for the Okefenokee Swamp, rumors persisted for decades. Maroon communities hidden in its depths. Free blacks living independently, unreachable by slave catchers. Some said descendants of Isaiah's group lived there until the 1890s. Archaeologists in the 1970s found evidence of human habitation deep in the swamp. Old cabins, tools, graves. Some of the graves had stones with markings that matched West African symbols. One stone, larger than the others, had a date carved into it, 1849, and a name, barely legible after over a century, Isaiah. Had Uncle Josiah and the others brought his body to the swamp after the execution? Given him a proper burial, African style? Or had someone else, years later, created a memorial? No one knows. But the stone is there, in the Okefenokee Koki, marking a place, marking a memory, marking the grave, real or symbolic, of a man who refused to be held. Today, if you know where to look in Valdosta, Georgia, you can find records, court documents, newspaper articles from 1849. Describing the Whitmore Massacre. The trial transcript, the execution notice. They call him a murderer in those documents, a monster, the most dangerous slave in Georgia history. They're not wrong, but they're not right either. Isaiah was a man, a husband, a father, a human being born free in Angola, enslaved by force, who endured 26 years of hell before finally saying no. He killed 17 people, that's a fact. But those 17 people participated in and profited from a system that killed millions. Was it murder? Was it justice? Was it both? History decides. Each generation judges these acts differently. But one thing is certain. Isaiah refused to be broken, refused to accept that he was property, refused to believe that his masters were his betters. And in refusing, he proved something vital. Enslaved people were not passive victims. They were humans in chains. And humans in chains will always dream of freedom, will always seek it, will always fight for it when the moment comes. That's the real legacy of Isaiah Ironback Johnson. Not the violence, not the body count, but the refusal, the resistance, the proof that the system was never as stable as it appeared, that it survived on fear and brutality. And when someone fearless appeared, the whole structure trembled. The story of Isaiah became one of hundreds, maybe thousands, of resistance stories from the slavery era. Most were never recorded. Most died with the people who lived them. The official history, written by the victors, portrayed enslaved people as content, docile, or at worst, mischievous. But the truth was different. Resistance happened every day. Small acts, work slowdowns, tool breaking, feigned illness, poisoning livestock, burning barns. Larger acts, running away, forming maroon communities, participating in rebellions. And sometimes acts like Isaiah's. Individual vengeance, personal justice, killing the oppressor and accepting the consequences. These stories were suppressed, minimized, erased from textbooks. Why? Because they revealed an uncomfortable truth. The system of slavery required constant, brutal enforcement because the enslaved never accepted it, never internalized the lies about their inferiority, always knew they were human, always resisted. Isaiah's story reminds us of this. It's been 160 years since the 13th Amendment ended chattel slavery in America, but the legacy remains. Mass incarceration. The 13th Amendment's exception clause, except as punishment for crime. Millions of Black Americans imprisoned, forced to work for pennies, families destroyed. A new form of bondage wearing the mask of justice. Police brutality. The direct descendant of slave patrols. The same fear, the same violence, the same refusal to see full humanity. Economic inequality. Generational wealth was stolen from enslaved people, never repaid, never addressed. The wealth gap today is a direct line from slavery through Jim Crow to the present. And resistance continues, in new forms, protests, movements, voices demanding justice, demanding recognition, demanding change. The spirit of Isaiah, the refusal to accept injustice, the willingness to fight back, lives on. You might ask, why tell this story? Why focus on violence? Why glorify murder? The answer is, this isn't glorification. This is documentation. For too long, the history of slavery has been sanitized, made palatable, turned into a story of patient suffering rewarded by enlightened white people. But that's a lie. Freedom wasn't granted. It was fought for. By people like Isaiah. By people like Harriet Tubman, who carried a gun and freed hundreds. By people like Nat Turner, who led a rebellion that killed 60 white people. By the 200,000 black soldiers who fought in the Civil War. By every person who ran, who resisted, who fought back. And the violence? Yes, it was real. It was brutal. It was horrific. But it pales in comparison to the violence of slavery itself. 150 years of systematic torture, rape, murder, family destruction, cultural genocide. Millions dead in the Middle Passage, millions more worked to death in fields. Generations erased. Isaiah killed 17 people in one night. Slavery killed 17 million people over 2.5 centuries. Context matters. This story matters because it reminds us that oppressed people have always fought back, that human dignity cannot be destroyed, only suppressed. And when suppression becomes unbearable, explosion follows. It matters because the fight for justice isn't polite, isn't comfortable, isn't convenient for those in power. It matters because Isaiah's choice, death over continued bondage, is the choice every oppressed person faces eventually. Submit or resist. Live in chains or die fighting. Some choose submission, no judgment. Survival is valid. Protecting family is valid. But some choose resistance, and we need to remember them, honor them, learn from them. Isaiah chose resistance, chose violence, chose death. And his story echoed through generations, inspiring others, planting seeds that grew into movements that eventually brought down the institution of slavery. One man, one night, 17 deaths, and ripples that never stopped spreading. If you've made it this far, if you've read this entire story, you might be feeling conflicted. Good, you should be. This isn't a comfortable story. It's not meant to be. It's a story about a man pushed beyond all endurance who struck back with terrible violence. A man who killed people, yes, guilty people, but people nonetheless, and died for it. It's a story about a system so evil that it turned peaceful people into killers, that destroyed families as casually as we discard trash, that treated human beings as livestock. It's a story about America's original sin and the ongoing refusal to fully reckon with it. But it's also a story about courage, about dignity, about the unbreakable human spirit. Isaiah was a slave for 26 years. But in his heart, in his soul, he was always free, always human, always a warrior. And when the moment came when he had nothing left to lose, he proved it. He broke his chains. He killed his oppressors. He died on his own terms. That is the story of Isaiah Ironback Johnson, the man they couldn't hold, the man who refused to be broken, the man whose spirit lives on in every person who stands up to injustice and says, "No more." If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it challenged you, here's what you can do. Leave a like. Let the algorithm know that these hidden histories matter, that stories like Isaiah's deserve to be told. Comment below and tell us, was Isaiah a murderer or a freedom fighter? What would you have done in his situation? Do you know other stories of slave resistance that should be told? How do we honor these histories today? Share this video. Most people don't know these stories. They weren't taught in school. Sharing spreads the knowledge, spreads the truth. Subscribe and hit the bell. We have dozens more stories like this. True stories of resistance, rebellion, and the fight for freedom. Stories that history books erased. Stories that need to be remembered. Remember, this happened. Isaiah existed. His story is real. And there are thousands more like him. Enslaved people who fought back, who resisted, who refused to accept their bondage. Their names are mostly lost, but their spirit remains. In every movement for justice, in every person who stands up to oppression, in every voice that says, "Enough." We stand on the shoulders of giants like Isaiah. The least we can do is remember them. Share this story. Keep the memory alive. Make sure that Isaiah Ironback Johnson is never forgotten.